The Groton sub base dodged a bullet when it was taken off the base closing list after a strong fight by state leaders. Well, now the fight is underway to solidify the base's future. And with us now is Congressman Joe Courtney. Congressman Courtney, thanks for being with us.
Good to see you, Dennis.
And from Washington today.
Yeah.
I want to ask you, first of all, what are you doing to make sure that the base doesn't end up on another closing list in the future?
Well,
and it could happen.
Absolutely. There will be probably at some point another BRAC round. There is nothing on the books right now, nothing authorized by the Congress. But the biggest issue that I think for the future of the sub-base and all sub-bases around the country is, are we going to have a submarine fleet? When George Bush took office in 2000, the American Navy had 315 surface ships and submarines. We're down to 276 today. The projections in terms of decommissioning Reagan-era submarines is going to pull the number of subs down to below 40 unless we start to step up production. And this year, we got advanced procurement towards a second submarine for the first time in 15 years, so that there will be, number one, a higher production rate at the EB shipyard, which is now down to about 7,500 workers from its heyday of 30,000 back in the 1980s. And secondly, it means that we are going to bolster the size of America's fleet, which I think, frankly, is a huge national security challenge that has gone way, way neglected for far too long. None
of the presidential candidates seem to be talking about beefing up the sub-fleet, though, if he or she or any of them are elected.
Well, certainly Chris Dodd is, who was a strong ally in our efforts to get that done. But the fact of the matter is, a lot of people who are thoughtful observers about the American military are beginning to speak out about the fact that a fleet which stood at 600 under Ronald Reagan, again, down to 276 today, with a much busier world of maritime traffic, needs to be strengthened. Atlantic Monthly, in their November issue, actually has a huge feature piece on the fact that we have really dropped the ball in terms of the decline of our shipbuilding industrial base and also the size of America's Navy.
What does one sub mean for the economy there?
What it means basically is that we're going to stabilize the workforce. Back in January, EB held a breakfast for the Southeast legislative delegation and myself in the Senate offices, where they warned that we would lose probably between 2,000 to 4,000 jobs if we didn't get the sub production rate up to a higher level, because the repair and maintenance work that's been sort of keeping the workforce kind of limping along down there is drying up. So this was, again, a huge breakthrough. It was a big lift. The president did not support us from January, when he came out with his original budget, all the way through final passage, when we finally got enough support in the House and Senate to make sure that he had to sign the bill.
There's also some talk that other things need to be done in that region in the event that the sub-base does close someday and there's nothing you can do to stop it. What else is being done to improve that area?
The base is old and it's also cramped. And what we need to do is upgrade and modernize it, and also clear out some of the space so that there is, again, a 21st century operation that's there. In the military construction budget bill, again, I serve on armed services, we had, again, two very good bits of news. We're going to have money for a new operations center, which is a $10 million project on the base, and a new submarine training school, which again is really one of the real strengths of the sub-base, which is that it's where America's submariners go to get their best state-of-the-art, cutting-edge training. There's a new pier that the Navy is building down there, and our goal right now in my office is to make sure that the Navy follows through on a commitment for a second pier next year.
There have been some suggestions that perhaps more should be done to capitalize in the submarine industry there in terms of tourism, so that people will stop, because it's the sub-capital of the world.
Well, I certainly think that's a very interesting idea. I think it's true. And I think that as people learn more about the rich history that New London has, is really the birthplace of America's submarine fleet, and the incredible treasure of stories. And I've been to the Submarine League and the veterans groups that's there. There really is actually a lot of potential. The Coast Guard Museum obviously is something that we know is coming to New London, and I think all of that, along with the Mystic Seaport, I mean, we really have a very rich maritime history going back to Moby Dick in New London area that we can really capitalize on.
And cruise ships are coming in now.
That's
in
right.
fact, we did a story on one just recently that came to New London Harbor. They had been to Boston, I believe, Newport and Portland, Maine. But they were disappointed when they came to New London. They said there was nothing for them to do there. A lot of boarded up storefronts and things like that. How do you change the face of New London? Well,
again, I think, first of all, it's a distressed city which has a lot of challenges in terms of just its property tax base. It's a tiny sliver geographically. One of the things on the Education Committee, which is my other assignment, that I've been fighting hard for, is to get the Title I funding for No Child Left Behind, special ed funding for local school districts, which is, those unfunded mandates that the federal government puts on communities like New London are one of the reasons why it struggles, so much in terms of high property taxes, which gets into that cycle of distressed properties that unfortunately is part of Connecticut's landscape to a much too high a degree. Unfortunately, the president vetoed the education spending bill, which again boosted spending in both of those areas there. I frankly am, as somebody who has been through countless town hall meetings where people are so angry about property tax issues and unfunded federal mandates, this was an opportunity for the White House to work with us to try and deal with these issues. But it looks like we're going to have to just keep grinding it out as we go back in for the rest of this month of December.
You talk a lot about President Bush, who has a very low approval rating right now, but the approval rating for Congress is lower than his. How do you respond to that?
Well, first of all, in terms of the work I've been doing on the Education Committee, the College Cost Reduction Act, $20 billion investment into Pell Grants, cutting the interest rates for Stafford student loans. I mean, there have been victories and successes that, frankly, are very meaningful to a district like mine, which is the home of UConn, Eastern Connecticut State University, 3 community colleges, where 38,000 students across Connecticut are going to benefit from that legislation. And the defense spending bill obviously was a huge victory where, again, over White House opposition, we had a breakthrough in terms of the shipbuilding budget. But, issues like children's health insurance, education funding, the war in Iraq. I mean, we clearly have an executive branch which has no interest in being a partner with the Congress. And as a result, we've had to rely and try and scrape to find veto-proof margins. If you look at American history, only 5% of presidential vetoes in American history have ever been overridden with margins in House and Senate. So it's a very daunting challenge. Unfortunately, though, programs like Husky in Connecticut are the ones that pay the price when we have this sort of gridlock down in Washington. My position is I'm an independent voice for my district. I'm going to work hard on the issues that I can get things done. And obviously, we're going to spend as much time to get through the rest of these challenges that exist with the gridlock that's there.
The tax burden in Connecticut is one of the heaviest of all states in the country, yet we get a very small percentage back. How do you change that in Congress?
Well, obviously, we had a big win with the sub funding. I mean, that's $588 million of advanced procurement, which not a penny of which the president had proposed in his initial budget. Believe me, that was a heavy lift for a freshman member of Congress on the Armed Services Committee to convince my subcommittee on Sea Power, the full Armed Services Committee, and then to go to the Budget Committee and to get that done. So, again, I think your point is well taken, but we certainly have shown some signs of life here.
So it is improving a little bit.
It is. And the AMT issue, the alternative minimum tax, Connecticut is one of the hardest hit states. I know John Larson talked to you about this. I mean, this is, again, a must-pass bill for Connecticut because if we don't get a fix to the AMT, our state is probably going to take as hard a hit as any part of the country. Again, the House passed a very good measure that's paid for that deals with that issue. We're hoping that the Senate is going to match it and we're going to get that issue taken care of.
The race for your district is always tight, always, I mean, a barn burning down to the very end, and next year is going to be no exception. I imagine you're already raising money. I mean, after 1 year in office, you're already doing it. How are you preparing to run next year?
Reminding people of my nickname, Landslide Courtney, which was my moniker when I was sworn in last January. And again, it's an exciting district. I love campaigning in it, and we've been certainly out holding town hall meetings, going up to the University of Connecticut campus, down to Groton, getting around as much as I possibly can. Obviously, you've got to get your message out, and you work hard to build your war chest, and you've got to pay attention to that if you're serious about running for office in this country.
Senator Chris Dodd running for president, will you be campaigning for him at all?
I already have been. I was up in New Hampshire a couple weeks ago and talked a lot about his proposals on education, community college being cost-free, which is one of his, I think, very smart, good proposals out there. And if we could make it happen, I want to try and get out to Iowa before caucus day.
There are some folks, who might be leaning toward Hillary Clinton, who's ahead in the polls. How do you persuade them that they shouldn't vote for her, but they should vote for Chris Dodd?
Well,
what do you say?
It's funny. I've been on the phone and with folks out in Iowa talking about this. And the interesting thing is that, number one, there's a lot more undecided folks than these, how would you vote today polls indicate. Secondly, he is viewed very favorably. I mean, people have gotten a pretty good look at Chris because of the retail kind of politics that exist out there. And really what we're trying to convince people is to go with, what they believe in, because, his message about the fact that, a lot of the structural damage that this administration has done to this country in terms of just constitutional issues about FISA and the military tribunal law, where he's been a real leader in the Senate, is something that people really care about. And we've just got to convince them that, they just got to stay focused on what they really believe in and go to caucus day and support Chris Dodd.
Why do you think, back to your district for a moment, why do you think yours is so tight and people like Rosa DeLauro and John Larson have a cakewalk? It's easy for them. They don't have to raise all that money.
Yeah, it's well, it's a sprawling district, very diverse in terms of the issues. I mean, again, you go from Suffield, Connecticut, and where education issues and property tax and land conservation, down to Groton, which again have the maritime issues. So it's a challenging district in terms of campaigning and representing it. So I think that's part of the tradition that's there. And it's also a district that really expects their congressman to really show what you're doing every single day. And that's what I get up every morning and am determined to do.
Congressman Joe Courtney, thank you so much for being with us today.